Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome to a Halloween special of Battle of the Brackets. I'm Chris, joined tonight with George, Tate, Tom, hiding under the very creepy beard. And back by popular demand, we have Al today. George, unlike most of the other rounds, will be judging for us tonight. He's been having a lot of internet trouble the last couple of days. I don't know how he's been coping. He's going full-on Jack Torrance the last couple of days, stir crazy. But he's back through the power of 4G. And because of that,
and a very expensive bill.
And we should also say at the beginning as well, we usually have an image that has the brackets up and all the different picks. We're so low res tonight that we don't even have one of those prepared, but the show must go on. The bracket is the most important thing. The stream's the most important thing, and it's still going to be an absolute hell of a show. As you can see, we're in all kinds of colourful and wacky costumes tonight. I don't even know what half of us are based off, but we just threw whatever props we found around the house, I'm sure, and just threw it on, but it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to this. It feels like it's been a while since the last Battle of the Brackets.
He looks like an Austrian, like someone drinking like beer at Oktoberfest.
Okay, we may as well clear up our costumes before we even start. I'm meant to be Robin Hood because I've got like a bow and arrow in the background. I've got the green cape and the hat. It was the lowest effort, right? The absolute lowest effort costume I could possibly think of. And I've actually been sent a text message by one of my friends saying I look like Peter Pan. So.
And I'm the Crow, like just.
No, you're not. You're Noel Fielding from the IT Crowd.
There you go.
You are Noel Fielding from the IT Crowd.
I went for multiple options. Sting from WWF or WWE or whatever wrestling thing he was a part of. I don't know, but yeah, let's go with Noel Fielding. It's cleaner. Tom, what are you? Hagrid? Like I don't know.
No, I am unspecified copyright compliant wizard.
And Al, you're like
I'm also fully compliant. This is what I used to wear in my old band live, and I just sort of, you know, that scene like the Three Musketeers with fucking Keith Sutherland in it, when at the end they all get it out of the cubby holes and they get the whole sort of tunics out and they'll sword and shit, put it back on, they defend. Yeah, sort of like that. Sort of got out of my cubby hole. So again, copyright compliant. So legally. Nothing they can do.
George,
I'm Poe Balboa.
Poe Balboa.
I took this before I came home for the weekend, and now I'm very cold, so I have my Rocky dressing gown. It's the best I could do. It was either this, everything else I own seems to cover the face. But notice I've got quite a collection of masks appearing. So I have a Lucius Malfoy one, a Kylo Ren one, an Infinity Gauntlet, which I guess I should have brought with me as well. Actually, that'd been cooler. And I swear there's another one. Oh well, one day we'll get the Green Goblin mask, and then that'll be much better. That'll be for the Spider-Man Battle of the Brackets.
It's going to happen.
The Holy Trinity.
But yes, so as you know, we should have said Happy Halloween, everyone, as well. We've never really done a Halloween special on the channel at any point, as far as I can remember. So this is a first, and what better show to do for a Halloween special than Battle of the Brackets? We've said many times it's our favorite show to do, and we do try and get one out a month, as and when we can. The trade-off is that most of us on this stream anyway aren't really horror guys, so I don't know if you've had to like. Well, Tate, especially because you're battling tonight.
I'm not gonna lie. You look at these picks, and they're all horror / another type of film.
Yeah.
A lot of horror thrillers, a couple of horror comedies, horror dramas, sci-fi horror. We have maybe one or two which is out and out horror on this list, but that really kind of speaks to volumes of how we judge horror films in ourselves. We all picked what we thought would be the best horror film of all time. And hopefully we'll be able to decide what that is by the end of tonight.
Absolutely. Now, as I said, you're going to have to bear with me here, guys. This is going to be very, very low res. We don't have a picture to throw up, so I'm going to go with a kind of visual cue from Google Images. So I'm going to start screen sharing now. Hopefully that works. If you guys can tell me if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
A lot of tabs.
A lot of tabs, as you can see. So going through the fights, we have Tate versus Chris. And that is John Carpenter's The Thing against Evil Dead 2. We have Tom versus Al with The Exorcist and Hellraiser. We have Tate.
Wait a sec, Chris. Chris, I'm going to point your attention straight to the chat that I've put up because you need to keep an eye on it for a second. that I put towards us.
Do you want me to
And
carry on, gentlemen?
You will understand. Yes, George, if you want to carry on for a second.
So we've got The Thing versus The Evil Dead 2. I don't know who has either pick. We have The Exorcist versus Hellraiser. We have Shaun of the Dead, apparently a horror film, against The Shining. We have A Nightmare on Elm Street, I believe the original one, against Van Helsing.
Oh,
we
no, the
have.
remake.
Oh, is it the remake?
No, it's definitely not.
I don't know who picked it. I've not seen them. We have The Haunting versus Birds.
Oh,
We
God,
have
so-
Psycho versus Insidious. We've got my favorite one, Alien versus Get Out. And we have The Fly versus... Oh, God, I can't read my
Silence of the
handwriting.
Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs. My bad, that's completely my fault. I'm going to make that a bit
Ow.
Yeah, and that is it. I don't know who's fighting who. I'm just here for the ride.
That's okay. The first round is going to be John Carpenter's The Thing versus Evil Dead 2. That is me versus Chris. So does someone want to get on the timer for that one?
I shall get on the timer for that one. If you bear with me, let me load up my device. It feels so weird to judge it. I mean, Tate sat there like, oh God, thank God I don't have to go up against George. But for those that don't know the rules, you're going to get a minute and a half. No, sorry, it's going to be a minute on the clock for the first set of rounds, followed by opponent's minute, followed by a 30-second rebuttal each, and then we shall put it to a democratic vote to declare a winner of each round, of course.
Before we start, we've had one comment so far from Nicola saying, my favourite horror film was Solo, a Star Wars story, complete nightmare. And I'm just going to let that hang while George is in his Poe Dameron helmet, and we're going to move to the first round.
Hey, Solo is a great film. I can't doubt that. Hobbit is easily a horror film. They both begin with H-O.
Yeah.
Oh, low blow there. Okay, low hanging fruit.
GoPro.
Okay.
Right, we'll say that for another battle one day.
Yes.
Right, who's going first out of you two?
I am going first.
The Thing. Have a minute on the clock now.
I have to say, this is one of the greatest horror films of all time, purely because of the tension that it creates with its characters. We're stuck in a very isolated area. We're stuck in the Antarctic. And the sense of horror comes in the fact that you don't know who the villain really is. You don't know who is being possessed by the Thing itself. And the sense of unknown that is brought forward by that brings a real sense of tension. That is perfectly shown in the blood test scene, which still gets me on the edge of my seat every single time I watch it. The ending itself as well leaves you with a sense of isolation and dread and that uneasiness. With horror films, sometimes it's that tension that brings that uneasiness, not the need for jump scares itself, which it does excellently in this film. It earns its spot there. But to go along with that, you've got the direction, brilliant by John Carpenter, taking a film which was almost long forgotten, not very horrific, into a film which is a modern classic and on people's all-time best films list, let alone horror lists. And the acting itself...
Stop. Chris, go.
Okay, so you just mentioned there that your film was based on I think it was the original 50s movie, very, very cheesy B-horror movie. So obviously updating it to like an 80s gore fest is going to be much better in comparison. With Evil Dead 2, it almost did the impossible, where the first film in the franchise was already very successful, had a great following, was a very low-budget horror film, but did very well for itself, got Sam Raimi's name on the map. Obviously, he'd later go on to make the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy. Going to throw that in there. But Evil Dead 2, it turned what people now come to expect from that franchise. That was all born from Evil Dead 2. The first one was an all-out horror. This one injected elements of comedy and slapstick into it, but that cemented the identity that has become Evil Dead. Bruce Campbell was in the first movie, but no one really paid much attention to him. In the second one, he became that household name, and it all began from this movie. You have gore, you have great practical effects, you have all this wacky, imaginative stuff going on from the pure...
Stop.
Oh.
Go.
You kind of talked about how the first film from this franchise is cheesy, and The Thing remake by John Carpenter absolutely grounded the franchise. It took elements which was cheesy and corny in the 50s and completely drenched it in horror. Not only that, but your film, you even said yourself, was a bit more fun, had some jokes in that. I've watched Evil Dead 2. I don't remember getting scared or horrified at any point in the film. I can name a couple of scenes from The Thing where I was on the edge of my seat, tense, especially the first time when I was watching it, like a little bit younger, hiding behind a pillow, not knowing what's going to happen next.
Go.
The thing is with The Thing that when you get to the end of the movie's been building and you're expecting this great big finale to it when you see The Thing in its final glory. And they shot that end sequence with the stop motion animation, it looked terrible when they cut it. So as such, the movie feels very anticlimactic. Evil Dead 2 does not let up. There is so much creative stuff going on there. Lots of thrills, lots of gore, lots of blood, and lots of legitimate scares, but with like a comedic edge to it slightly. And that's why I think Evil Dead 2 has the upper hand on The Thing. The Thing has some great psychological stuff going on, but Evil Dead 2 doesn't let up.
Say, anyone have an opinion yet? Sorry, I'm plugging your charger in.
That was very tough. That was a very tough opening fight.
I thought that was quite poor, in all honesty. No one really argued for who actually had the best horror film. I'm going to give this to Tate, just off the go, purely because Chris digged himself into a hole when he said Evil Dead 1 had more horror elements, and this made it more slapstick. I think that was the one line which sealed it. Like I said, it was a quite poor argument overall, but my vote's against Tate for this one.
That's fair enough. Al or Tom?
Yeah, I think the same thing, to be honest. Sorry. I think Tate's argument about the tension it built up was really strong. And I think with Evil Dead 2, that humor kind of takes the edge off.
And Tom?
I disagree. Well, actually, I like them both. So.
I like them both.
But no, I'd say, Chris, you didn't argue quite enough about the fact that the horror comes from how surreal it all seems, which I think was a missed opportunity, because that's probably some of the scariest moments, especially when he's actually stood and everything's laughing at him.
Yeah,
it's quite unsettling. But yeah, I'd have to agree with everyone else that it goes to Tate.
Yeah, definitely. The Thing is one of my favorite horror films, and when I saw that my pairing of Evil Dead 2 got paired against that, I knew that the end was in sight.
I'm really sorry, Chris, because I know you love that film, and even when we did the draft, I knew that you wanted that film.
I couldn't even go like practical effects versus practical effects, because I mean, come on.
Yeah, come on.
So our next round, we have Tom versus Al. Tom with The Exorcist and Al with Hellraiser. So Tom is up first with The Exorcist. 1 minute on the clock. George, you gonna?
Am I doing the clock?
You may as well do the clock for all of them, George.
Right, that's fine. It's 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so The Exorcist is the ever made in the history of the genre. So William Friedkin directs a masterful take on sort of abusive life and children, the innocence of children being taken away, and also the fact that it's heavy themes about religion. So Max von Sydow's character, Father Merrin, has a crisis of faith. And his crisis of faith is tested through the horrific images presented in the film, which are quite gruesome. So you think about the scene where she masturbates with a crucifix. It's quite horrific, head turning. It's full of iconic imagery, which is why I think it still resonates quite a lot today. That imagery is still ingrained in people's minds, and especially that one frame.
Go, Al.
Yeah, it's still ingrained in people's minds because it's grim, not because it's scary. I mean, The Exorcist is old and dated. The whole priest thing's so overdone. It's just a simple plot line. It's just a simplistic story. Let's be honest, not a lot happens in it. It's just all little things that happen within like one sort of event. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's pretty dull. Whereas you take Hellraiser, Jesus Christ, people die, people get their souls stolen, they get taken back from hell. I mean, you want gore. You don't want to watch The Exorcist, watch Hellraiser. And you got a decent plot line, you got twists as to who the bad guy is. Do you know what I mean? You get recurring characters, you get different themes about good and evil, and people's sins with the little box, because they've got to really want it to open the box, and that's what's their downfall. So I mean, it's just got so much more to it than, oh, a girl's got a demon inside her. Get a priest. Oh no, I'm not sure about it. Oh, I'll do it. Oh no, I'm not sure about it. Oh, I'll do it.
Stop.
Oh no.
So that is an oversimplification of plot. You could say that.
Oh,
sorry, but you could film film about that. Just the simplest components. The Exorcist deals with heavy subject matter, and sorry, but it's shocking to see a child do stuff like that. You know, childhood is innocent. It's supposed to be quaint. It's supposed to be. Oh, well.
I'll go.
Yeah, but have you seen Saw? I mean, that's the same, isn't it? It's got a crap plot. It's just like gore. I mean, come on. It's just there to be shocking. I mean, there's not much of a story there. It's just there basically to be visually offensive. And you know, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that is its purpose. It is gore porn. It's not. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't serve the story in any way, as it does with Hellraiser. And you see people regenerating. The practical effects are amazing in those films.
Oh wow!
Oh my god!
Al is on fine form once again.
That's where the cowboy piss.
What the hell has Saw got to do with it?
I'm gonna go first here. Tom won that overwhelmingly.
What?
Al's random rambling. I just couldn't get around it. He didn't completely articulate why his film was the best horror film of all time. Whereas Tom went a little bit more in depth into the themes of the film itself and how it could affect audiences. So I'm going to go with Tom.
You say this, but like, by God, if I'll be lying if I say that Al hasn't made me want to watch Hellraiser right now.
All I got was like a box and gore.
That's all you need. That's all you need. No, I am going to give it to Tom. We were kind of losing you a little bit there, Tom, with your audio. You were cutting in and out, but I got the bulk of your argument there. I think it was just. I think it was just.
I'm losing you in a minute.
Yeah, we got a bit of lag there as well, I think, but it was just a much more fleshed out argument. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to be else. And then Al, you was mentioning that, you know, gore doesn't make something, but then also in the same breath you were saying that Hellraiser has phenomenal gore, so I got a bit confused there where the argument was on that. But yeah, I'm giving it to Tom, I'm afraid.
I was actually going to give it to Al, but it doesn't matter because Tom goes through. I just thought Tom just described the plot of The Exorcist and Al just destroyed it, and Tom didn't have anything to say.
Ow! What does Saw have to do with anything?
I wasn't arguing. So I just saw that Al just destroyed it in the opening round.
I'm sorry, but
you're through, Tom. It doesn't matter.
But, you know.
You're through. It doesn't matter.
I love how Tom kind of looks like a Cyberman Santa hybrid with the blue coming off his headphones.
Looks like Radagast the Brown.
This is getting really unbearably itchy. Sorry,
it's getting hot. That's what it's doing.
This is keeping me nice and warm. It's nice.
Oh my god, it's Tom! I didn't know he was here.
Right. Yeah, it was unbearable.
That's absolutely right. So next up, we have Shaun of the Dead versus The Shining,
which is
wouldn't have expected
again.
As far as fights are concerned, I wouldn't have expected that to come along at any point.
Same here. I don't know why on earth someone picked a comedy.
It counts. It's horror comedy. It's got horror in the name, so we'll run with it.
It's about the arguments. It's about the arguments.
That's what we're waiting on. Prove me wrong, Tate. You've got. Oh, I'm doing the clock, aren't I? You've got 1 minute on the clock going now.
So, if we're going to go into Shaun of the Dead, and people are wondering why it's on this list, and I'd have to start off by saying it's a perfect critique of the horror genre itself. It's well executed by Edgar Wright. I think it's one of his best films, and the sense of horror that it brings in the film itself is that if you were put into this situation, this is how some people might react in the UK, or at least the stereotypical response. And it plays out in a way that you can enjoy the film all the way through. You can have a laugh. The horror elements that do come in, including scenes of actual horror where he has to shoot his own mum, and scenes where he has to say goodbye to his friend at the end, which can be seen as horror drama in itself, really play to the film's strengths and allow everyone to enjoy the experience and get along with every single element of the film. The one problem I have with The Shining is the fact that it's a very inherently boring film, and it almost plays off that. And I feel like maybe if they'd gone a little bit closer to the themes of the actual book...
Stop. Chris, go.
There really is no contest for this argument. I mean, this is Stanley Kubrick at his finest. This is horror at its purest form. And what I love about The Shining more than anything, obviously, you've got a great cast of characters, phenomenally acted by Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall in the movie. the hotel itself is as much a character as anyone else in that film. The sense of isolation, the sense of dread, from the opening frame and that soundtrack at the opening of the movie, that screams horror to you. And right from the off, you know there's something almost otherworldly about this hotel. You know that there's something bad happened there. You get told that at the beginning of the movie, and then that just ramps up to its absolute peak at the end of the movie. You see this degradation of Jack Nicholson's character throughout the movie. Beautiful camera work, angles, just stuff that has lasted and has an absolute legacy and is so easily identifiable, to the point where Steven Spielberg even used a big bulk of that scene, and it was just scary as hell in 2018 as it was when it originally came out in 1980. Shaun of the Dead is inherently just a zombie movie.
It's a zombie movie that perfectly critiques the genre in itself. I feel like The Shining is just a meandering... It's very well directed. It's pretty well acted. I just think there's a lot of exposition that comes with it. And I feel like there is less focus on the actual horror elements in a film that is outright meant to be a horror film. This is a comedy horror film, Shaun of the Dead, and it pulls off both of those punches. Your film is just a meandering mess of a film that the writer of the book, Stephen King, didn't even like himself. How can you even...
Stop. Go.
I'm sure there are plenty of movies out there that the original authors didn't like, but Stanley Kubrick absolutely made it his own and, in my opinion, improved upon the source material. Shaun of the Dead inherently is just a zombie movie. Its one quirk and the one thing that it's got going for it is that it's got down-to-earth, regular, average Joes as the protagonist, but that doesn't make it scary. Every horror moment that it has and has been done to death in countless zombie movies before, to the point where even when that movie came out, apart from the fact that it was a comedy, the zombie genre is kind of dead. We'd seen it. Every possible trajectory that you can go with a zombie movie has been done. The Shining is absolutely its own thing. Oh.
Game over, man.
Game over.
Has anyone got their mind up first?
I've got some thoughts. Firstly, Tate, you called it boring. That's bold, and I respect that. And I agree. Secondly, though, you accused the other film of being a meandering mess. Glass houses much with Shaun of the Dead? Really? A bit?
But Chris didn't attack that, did he?
No. I am going to give it to you, Tate. I think you well critiqued his film. It is you're right. It's very well directed, but it's a bit meandering. I think you clinched it there, son.
I'll go next. I'm going to give it to Chris. I thought Tate attacked strong, but then he was praising the direction, the performances, and he ended up doing a bit more praise. He did more praise than he did attack. Just kept it going for the plots. Whereas I thought Chris had the perfect defense and epitomized the zombie horrors. I made a good point that Shaun of the Dead is just about average people. So I thought that just knocked him over, just on the finish line. So I'm going to give mine to Chris.
Thank you.
Tom.
Goes to you, Tom.
Oh, Christ. I bet we do this. It'll have to go to Chris, I do believe.
God, I thought you were going to say something very controversial.
My reasoning being that Chris articulated his points rather well, and for a moment, Tate, you seemed to agree with him, the fact that it was well directed, has some iconic imagery in it. So I didn't quite really get where you're coming from in that respect. However much I do like both of them, I think the outright winner is sort of Chris in this one.
Full disclosure, I don't think the film's a meandering mess. It's an absolute masterpiece.
Great.
I like the fact that
I do think there are some boring elements to it, but yeah.
It's weird when you're going up against a movie you love. It afterwards, it does feel like that moment where like you've been put on the naughty step and you have to go and apologize to your parents. Right? Sorry. Next round we have Tom versus Al again. We have Tom with the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and we have Al with one of his regular picks on these shows. We have the 2004 movie Van Helsing. I believe it's 2004, 2003, 2004. The Hugh Jackman movie that everyone loves. Maybe it's just me and Al that love that movie, but we'll find out in the arguments. So 1 minute on the clock. We have Tom start with the Nightmare on Elm Street, and
go now.
Okay, when you think of classic horror villains, who do you think of? Freddy, Michael Myers, you know, Jason, those are the three main people you think of. This is the classic in terms of surrealist horror. What Wes Craven did here was turn a genre on its head, and bring it into genres new. So he set out to make a slasher film. What he did was make a surrealist masterpiece. It's full of imagery that is gruesome, full of likable characters and themes of neglect. So all the parents are alcoholics in the film, if you noticed. So they neglect their kids, and that stems and that breeds these nightmares. It's just brilliant. What can you say? So some of the scenes, the opening.
Stop. Al, go.
Okay, well, really, I mean, you're going to talk about revamping the old stuff? Come on. We've got Dracula, we've got Frankenstein's monster, Dr. Frankenstein himself, Dracula's brides, werewolves. I mean, what do you want? It's the revamp of the old Hammer horror classics. And frankly, I think they did a brilliant job. I love the imagery from the start when it opens, the Universal Pictures, and then it fades to the torch when it's in black and white. I love that opening scene with the women on fire and Frankenstein's monster. It's got so much iconic imagery in it, and it really harks back to those old films, but it does it in a new way. I think the characters are really well done. It's got campy elements, it's got elements of humor. I mean, it's partly for families. Come on, but it's got some real action in it. And to be honest, the character design I think is fantastic, and they've really done justice to those old movies, and they've brought those characters to life in a new way. I think that Freddy Krueger is just a pedo and a stupid.
Stop.
Right, sorry.
I kind of wanted to give him an extra 10 seconds to finish that.
Right. But your quote about "it's for families," sorry, but it has absolutely no business being on this bracket because of that statement. It's for families. Horror should not be for families. Horror should be gruesome, gory, and scare the living hell out of everybody. Freddy is the epitome. It makes you afraid to go to sleep. It makes you afraid to dream. It makes you afraid to even have the sense of shutting your eyes, and it's probably one of the
stop.
Absolutely not. This is the classic horror characters from the classic horror company. I mean, it's a revamp of the old stuff. It really is classic horror. We've got people being killed in that. Come on, we've got people being blown up. We've got vampires being killed. I mean, what more do you want? It's a bleeding horror movie. Look at the old like The Black Cat or The Mummy 1933. You look at those now, you don't really get scared, but they are horror movies all the same. You can't look at it with that lens. You might not be scared by it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not a horror film. It does belong in that category.
Hey.
Stop. Pump the brakes.
Sorry.
That was actually a really tough fight, I'm not going to lie.
I disagree. I'm giving my point to Tom. I thought it was a stronger, more compelling argument. As much as I love how Tom just dominated in regards to being a horror film and bringing up the context of the film with that. I feel so articulated, not sort of actually fighting friends. It's so peaceful.
It's really clearing, isn't it? I feel like Tom kind of lost a little bit of sense of it towards the end. He was very good at defending his own film and stating why his film was good. I primarily disagree with the statement that horror film has to bring a sense of like horror and be blood curdling and shit like that, because there are some horror films that are targeted at younger audiences which still scare people just as easily. I mean, you could count Coraline for that as a prime example. You've also got horror elements in other films which are family friendly. Horror is something that can be put across multiple genres, and I disagree with you on that statement alone. Other than that, you completely won that battle fair and square. Like, there was no real attack from Al at all on Nightmare on Elm Street, and giving it to Tom.
I'll probably give it to Tom as well, but I will say it was closer for me. I like that Al talked about that, it's going back to original foundations of horror ultimately, which were those original Universal Monsters movies, and updating it. I really liked that angle, but beyond that, I really didn't get much of an argument other than that. You did kind of repeat that point, although it's a great point. So I am going to give that one to Tom. But I liked the points that you brought up with Van Helsing. But it's just, yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm sorry. I love Van Helsing, and I always will. We actually have, in the next round, we have Al fighting again, if I'm not mistaken. Al and Tate on this one.
The Haunting versus The Birds.
It's the 1999 remake version of The Haunting, we should say as well. I think the original came out in the 60s, I believe. Yeah. So this
starring
is
whom? Starring whom, Chris? Who was in what? Who was in that one?
Jesus himself, Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson, and a wily Catherine Zeta-Jones, if I remember rightly.
Yeah,
and we're going up against the original Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds. Did they ever do a remake of that? I know that one was talked about with Naomi Harris not Naomi Harris. What was the name of the one from Naomi Watts? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there has been a remake or not.
I don't think so.
I think that's been in.
There was a remake of The Thing, another remake which was done a couple of years ago, which was god awful. Don't watch it. But I remember there being a remake of The Birds.
I think it was talked about. It wouldn't surprise me if we get one at some point. Maybe that was
that cheesy horror film about birds.
Maybe it's probably got the same amount of.
Birdemic 2 is the best in the franchise by far.
Right, so we've got 1 minute on the clock. Al is up first with The Haunting, and then it will go to Tate after that. Yep, sorry, the bracket here is kind of all visually messed up. Yeah, okay, so 1 minute on the clock.
Go.
Okay, so this is a remake of the 1966 original, and it's from 1999. It stars Liam Neeson. He plays a doctor, and he's doing an experiment to do with sleep. So he gets a load of people, which stars like Owen Wilson, Catherine Zeta-Jones, that woman who's in The Conjuring, the mum, that woman. And they come in, and they sleep, and they're supposed to be studying them. But weird things start happening in the house. Things start moving. Eleanor, the main character, she hears voices. She almost gets attacked in her bed at one point. She sees spikes from her bed coming down. It's just crazy. I mean, it's a really plot. When the plot line getting into it, it really is weird because it's not really in there overtly. It's just flashes. I mean, she sees a woman hanging, a corpse. It's really weird. It's a gory imagery, but it's just so sinisterly done because it's so choppy, you can't really get a sense of what it means.
Stop. Go.
Okay, let's ground this back in reality. We have Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, with one of his absolute masterpieces itself in The Birds, taking something which is inherently very kind of human. So you can have a situation where you can be walking through a street and there'll be birds around there. People are scared of birds because of watching this film. And it works on different levels of horror in itself. It works on suspense. It works on paranoia. It works on the gore elements of people actually being killed by the birds in itself. The Haunting. I don't know much about this film. In fact, all I know about this film is the reviews that the original got and the reviews that this film got that you're arguing for. 87% on Rotten Tomatoes for the original, 16% on the new one. People saying it's lacking in good acting or anything like that. Saying it's possibly the worst performances from all the actors involved, lacked any sense of horror, and was very mundane in itself.
Stop.
You've got one of the best of all time.
Hey, I'll go.
Okay, firstly, it's not mundane. The acting is actually quite good. I think Owen Wilson's quite an interesting comedic character. However, he does get his head ripped off by a massive stone lion's head, which is really cool to see. There's a lot of really weird imagery in this, like cherubs that like whispering at you and doors that move and wood that twists. And it is really a horror movie. I think that even though it's a bit campy, a bit of a remake, maybe not to be taken too seriously, I do think it has some serious horror elements in there. What can you say about your movie?
Sorry, your film is not to be taken seriously and camp. Okay, thanks for that argument. My film terrified thousands of people. If you've ever walked out and you've seen a bird sat in a tree and looking at you, you do get that sense that you are being watched and that it could come for you. And this film works on that inherent level of fear, the fear of being attacked by something that you're out of control of. This shows hordes and hordes of birds flooding into people's nightmares. Does your film do that?
Stop. Anyone want to go first?
Just want to put it out there, like obviously not taking this into consideration in the argument. Has anyone ever been scared of birds? Like,
No, I did
really.
almost laugh though when Tate says, "Have you ever seen a bird looking at you and thinking it's looking at you?"
Yeah. Every time I've seen a bird look at me like that, I'm thinking, if it comes at me, I know I could fuck it up. Not scary.
although that being said, like I've been to some seaside destinations around the UK. The sea.
No, they will steal your chips.
I wouldn't I?
I'm more scared from the bird from Pirates of the Caribbean 2, where it pecks that guy's eyes out in the cage.
They have something similar in this film, but voting time, guys.
Right.
Voting time. I thought it was quite a poor argument overall. I thought Tate listing reviews off other people shows a lack of research into the topic. That's something I thought which I didn't like. So purely for that reason, I'm giving the point to Al because Al made more of a compelling argument for his film.
Yay!
Yeah,
Tom?
I'd have to agree. Without seeing the film, you can't properly judge its faults, and I think your attack was, relying off Rotten Tomatoes, which is a great source for reviews and critique. I just think generally overall Al's was a far superior argument.
I would. It was a very weak argument. I'm kind of split down the middle where I would have gone with this one. I know that. I guess it's subjective, isn't it? Like I will agree with Tate that like if you do see like loads of birds in a tree, it's kind of it does harken back to this movie. This movie has cemented that in your head.
Just throw a stone at them and then they'll fly away.
Yeah. And Al definitely had a lot more passion with his argument. You could tell it's a movie he definitely loves, and he will stand by that. And he talked about the but really all I got from his argument was someone gets their head ripped off by a lion statue, which I kind of want to see. I'm not going to lie. The decision's already been made. I'm very split down the middle. If I could have picked a tie, I would have. But for the sake of argument, I'll give it to Al as well on this one. But I did think it was a fairly weak argument across the board. Sorry.
And with that, Hitchcock is out. Swiftly, we have another Hitchcock film. Who picked Psycho?
Yes, that was me.
Chris versus Tom. Tom with Insidious. So
No.
Psycho
No,
versus
It's Al with Insidious.
Is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, poor Al's had to like fight 3 times in a row. Jesus.
I can do it. I'm powered by cowboy
Psycho.
piss.
Right, Al, you're up.
Oh wait, no, it's me first with Psycho, isn't it?
Sorry, that's what I meant. It's
Yeah,
Al's fight.
it is.
Yeah,
Chris,
Psycho
okay.
first.
God's sake, give me a fucking break.
1 minute on the clock. Starting now.
Okay, so the original 1960s Psycho, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, was almost made on a kind of lark. It was this fun little project he had going. No one expected it to do well. And actually, when it was originally released, word of mouth wasn't that great, but it was a huge box office success, which spawned many, many sequels and a remake as well. But we're here to talk about the original. And what a film it is. It still absolutely holds up today. With most of these older movies, some of the performances are very old Hollywood style, and you can't really hold them up to today's performers, for example. But by God, Anthony Perkins, still one of the greatest portrayals of any character acting in any film I've seen. He is chilling, and it's so... the horror comes from him seeming like a normal person, which is real horror to me. People who seem normal on the surface, but there's that darker level to them. On top of that, you've got masterful camera work. The score, is like such a driving power for that film, instantly recognizable, filled with dread, and it's bringing that sound of the strings.
Stop.
Okay.
I'll go.
Okay, well, I think we can argue that sound and that is very important, and I agree that it did that. But so did Insidious. My God, with the sound of the strings and the dread, like you said. Think about it. It's just, it's in the modern era is in moving forward, and we're taking things of the past and we're pushing them, and that's what Insidious has done. Think about the sense of dread in that movie and the camera work. Think about it. It was snap behind, and then it would just be behind his head. It's just you'll never know when you'll next see something or hear something or what things really mean, but then you understand later on. It's so you do feel on the edge of your seat the whole time when this film. It's not a slow burn. It really is terror, even though it's suspenseful. When it comes to Psycho, it's just Bird in a Hotel. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't seen it.
That's,
Oh,
Chris, you've got 30 seconds.
And right there, you've just summed up everything that's wrong with your movie. You talked about the jump scares, boom, and it's there. Jump scares aren't scary. You can crank the soundtrack up onto anything and people will jump in their seats. This is real horror right here. And also the fact it came out in 1960. A film like this would have been incredibly shocking. It is still shocking. And also the fact that Janet Leigh's character, the main character, the girl who's on the poster, spoiler alert, dies halfway into the movie. Completely ballsy. Most horror films don't even do that anymore. So there's just way more going for it. It's a historically important horror film, and it's, you know, it gave way to many other horror films that came out.
Al, go.
I think time will prove that Insidious is also a historic film. I mean, the camera work was incredible. Don't just blame it on the jump scares, because there was a lot of different angles, especially with the different lighting, for the different realms that he went to. It didn't seem overdone. It was all very subtle, but it all sort of worked. I mean, when you talk about the great visuals, think about the great makeup. I mean, what can you say about Psycho? The makeup isn't going to be as good as Insidious.
Stop. Anyone else want to go first?
I will say that Insidious has better makeup than what I've done today. But, I'm not saying much.
I'll go ahead and say that that wasn't exactly the strongest argument on either side. Chris, you had Psycho. You had Psycho.
You had the birds.
I know I did. And I have to vote for Insidious on this one. Al's actually attacked the film reasonably well, even though he hadn't seen it. And he defended his own film in the face of you saying that like the use of jump scares and the use of the effects was the downfalls to its film.
Tom?
Oh God, not again. It's the same thing I had with Tate's sort of argument. You can't attack a film if you haven't seen it. No. I do admire. I really do like. I do like Al's passion for all of his films at the moment. It's been really good. But passion doesn't win you arguments. So it's Chris to go.
I'd say by that sense, if you are purely basing your argument on like you can't vote against it because you haven't seen it, then I guess the final would be The Haunting versus Psycho.
Yeah, but my point is that you know, if you're going to attack a film, it's not so much if you haven't seen it. You can talk all day about the film you are arguing for, but if you haven't seen the film you're attacking, it kind of diminishes your arguments.
I disagree with that. What I will say to that is I do that all the time. I just research the film first. I would give this to Chris. I thought it was just a stronger argument overall for Psycho. Al, you thought well, but Chris just had it better and going into depth in regards to that. One thing I'll clarify about the last thing, the reason I didn't put Tate through is not because he hadn't seen it, was because he was listing Rotten Tomatoes reviews from the other people.
Yeah, I understand that. I was just clearing up that, like, yeah.
Right, okay. Next up, we have, who's got Alien?
Tom.
Tom.
Who's got Get Out?
Tate.
Me.
Oh, this is going to be very interesting.
This is actually, this and the next fight are the ones I'm most looking forward to. I think this is all to play for in this one, depending on the arguments.
This is
very different films. Incredibly
Who's
different.
Tom, you're up first.
Tom, you're up first. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so I'd like to talk about the existentialist horror that comes with Alien. So you're with a force that you don't understand and don't know in a universe that you can't comprehend, and the fact that they come across this monstrous alien form, you know, just pure coincidence is testament to how horrifying that idea actually is. And the tagline "In space, no one can hear you scream" is absolutely iconic, and you know, really plays that up in a fabulous sense. In terms of its isolationist as well, so you have really claustrophobic environments in which you can really feel the characters struggling to breathe, struggling to move around, and where this alien creature gets around with absolute ease. Probably one of the scariest bits in the film is where he's in the vents.
Go.
The argument here that this all boils down to is, would you believe that you could be scared in that kind of situation, or would you believe in the horror in that situation? You've got a film which is set in space where an alien monster is chasing you around a spaceship. I can't put myself in that setting. I just can't. The only scares in the entire film rely on jump scares, which in effect don't work after the first one. And the chestburster scene is the best scene in that film, and it comes in the first half. With Get Out, you've got that eternal sense of uneasiness. You've got that sense of not belonging in the situation that they're in. It's a social commentary horror on the modern day society that we're living in at the moment. And it speaks volumes to where we've come as far as what we are as the human race. Especially when looking at putting yourself in that situation where you're stuck with creepy parents, with a girlfriend you're starting to become unsure of, in a situation of horror where they might kill you.
Right. So I think the argument here that it relies on jump scares is completely null and void, because I can count on my hand that it has about 4. It's atmosphere and build up, and it brings a great atmosphere. All of this is set in the real world, even though it's a science fiction film. You know, the characters are real, they feel real, the spaceship feels lived in. And it is the first horror film I ever watched, and the only horror film that has stuck with me throughout my entire life.
Take go.
Well, not only that, but my film itself has a sense of claustrophobic horror in the sense that you can escape, but he actually can't in the situation he's placed in. You're stuck in a situation which is very believable. I just can't believe your situation. And because of that, I can't feel the horror. If you're in a believable situation, horror, it creeps around you. It follows you throughout the day. It follows you at night. And you'd never really want to be in either of the situations in these films. But the sense of uneasiness and dread that comes with Get Out.
This was a very, very tough argument.
I'm going to give this a Tate. I don't think Tom tacked Get Out enough. I think he did very well at defending it, but Tate had both the defense and the attack. So on that basis, I do have to give it 2 Tates for this one.
Al, do you want to go next?
Yeah, the same thing. I think Tate's attack was very, very strong. I'd have to give it to him as well.
I was tending towards Tate as well. I liked that he brought in the sense of, you know, when he really analysed the film, that it's sort of like a critique on modern society, everything like that. I thought that was a very interesting angle to go with it. Don't get me wrong, Alien is one of my favorite horror films. I absolutely love Alien, but as George put it as well, like, I didn't really get much of an attack towards Get Out. You did a very good job of defending your own and arguing for your own, but I didn't get that much of a attack. It's very difficult to split it over the 90 seconds to get both in there and do justice to your own pick, but I think it definitely tended more towards your own pick rather than Tate's one. So I am going to give this to Tate with Get Out. I'm sorry.
Tom, that serves you right, because Alien was going to be my number 1 pick.
Well, fuck you. I'm sorry, but I can't argue. I can't attack a film I haven't seen.
Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it, Tom?
That's fair enough. He has honour. You made it. Last up, this is going to be interesting. Who picked The Fly?
That was me.
Chris and The Fly versus who picked Silence of the Lambs?
Me.
Oh,
that was also going to be one of my picks as well.
Chris versus Tom. Right then. So, Chris, you are up first. It's The Fly. 3, 2, 1, go.
David Cronenberg is an absolute master in body horror, and in my opinion, this is definitely the best body horror film out there. There are plenty out there, but this one absolutely clinches it for me. Again, based on like an old 50s movie, there is an older version of The Fly. It's very, very cheesy. This one updated it and really gave it a sense of pathos and disgust and just this horrible, grimy sense to it. And it's definitely one of my favorites in the genre. You've got Jeff Goldblum in his best role, in my opinion, as Brundlefly. You really get this, and the film is a slow burn, and you know what it's ultimately going to amount to, but you see this degradation in him. I think that people said when it came out as well that you could read into it that it's an allegory for like AIDS, that was like the big craze at the moment, and everything that was talked about. There's a lot to read into this movie, but really you could almost look at this as almost like a stage play. Your main two players in the film are Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, and you see their relationship bloom. You see him go from this very confident guy when he first gets into the teleportation pod, and then that lingering sense.
And stop.
Okay,
Tom, go.
what is the most horrific thing you can think of? Mine is the internal nature of man, and this is the evil man can generate, which is mightily prevalent throughout the film. You think of Buffalo Bill and his grotesque sort of bodysuit that he's trying to build, and the evil he generates, and you think of the mild-mannered evil in Hannibal Lecter. So he appears very well presented and sort of well spoken, but underneath his guise is pure evil, and that is the scariest thing about Silence of the Lambs is the sense of man's inner evil coming out in gruesome and horrible ways. And of course, it deals with a lot of other things. So identity manipulation, the way Hannibal Lecter manipulates Clarice Starling.
Chris, go.
You talked about there, you remember Buffalo Bill in the skin suit. You really don't. Anthony Hopkins absolutely steals the limelight in that film, and the ultimate villain isn't about him. And also, you're talking about the real life horror of man. I don't see Hannibal Lecter as a real person in that. Anthony Hopkins' performance is very theatrical. It's very over the top. If you look at Brian Cox's performance of the same character in the earlier film Manhunter, that is much more like a real psychopath, a real sociopath. And it just feels very pantomime. It feels very over the top. Although it's an enjoyable performance, you don't get that sense of horror from it because of that. With The Fly,
Stop.
it's... Oh, my God, that's not enough time. Okay.
Right. I would totally disagree with that. So his well-spoken manner hides underneath pure evil, and you can't speak about the Manhunter because that's irrelevant in the context of this entire argument. Brian Cox was great, but Anthony Hopkins pushes it to another level. This is his Oscar performance, for good reason. It's something you can't really disagree with.
Stop. Wow, good game, good fight. Has anyone got a decision yet?
Yeah. Chris, you made me question Anthony Hopkins' performance. And I regard Anthony Hopkins' performance as one of the greatest of all time.
What, in Transformers 5?
Oh my God. He was in it for the paycheck, okay? Fair play. He's in retirement age now.
This feels
You've seen The Wolfman.
This feels exactly the same to me as what it felt like when Tom went off about Roy Batty in the Battle of the Brackets with.
God.
I know you still regret that, don't you, Tom? I don't think Chris believes it, but it did make me completely doubt the key performance in that film. So I'm gonna have to give it to Chris.
I had a similar opinion until Tom reminded everybody this is what he won the Oscar for. As great as Brian Cox is, I thought overall both arguments were very strong and compelling. However, Tom going into depth on the sort of the horror of man, that kind of struck a nerve with me. And I think on that basis, I don't think Chris argued enough for The Fly.
Mm-hmm.
So on that basis, I do have to give it to Silence of the Lambs.
Decider, Al.
I feel like you have to give it to Chris. Sorry.
I'm surprised about that. What are the reasons? What reasons?
I think it had a strong attack on it, to be honest. I haven't really seen the film, so it's quite difficult.
Have you seen either film?
No, but
I haven't.
captured me.
Okay, so we're going to start a game for people along at home. Take a shot every single time I haven't seen the film comes up in this video. We would love to hear a tally of it at the end.
In terms of movies I haven't seen on this list, the only one I haven't seen is The Haunting, 1999. Every other one I've seen on this list.
I haven't seen Hellraiser. I haven't seen The Haunting. I haven't seen Insidious. And that's it.
Okay, so is that concludes round one.
I haven't seen 10 of the 16. That's my horror knowledge. That is round one done, and lucky for you guys, I have an old school papers. score. So, if you look at the following screen and read this abysmal notes, you'll see that for round 2, we have The Thing versus The Exorcist, The Shining versus The Nightmare on Elm Street, The Haunting versus Psycho, and Get Out versus The Fly. Also known as Get Out Fly.
Get Out Fly, not as
Get Out
bad as
Fly.
Alien Get Out, which plays very well into the themes of the film.
Just don't give Ridley Scott ideas for the next one. I think it's been very interesting so far being a judge. I feel like I'm concentrating far more than I ever have done.
It's a weird experience, isn't it, George?
It's purely because I've got no computer, so I can't really do anything else. And I can't Photoshop because I'm not gonna lie, I do miss a couple of seconds per round photoshopping. But like you said, pen and paper, the pen is truly mightier than the mouse.
Do we have any comments to read through before we move on to the next round?
Just that Sheila thought my makeup was absolutely terrifying. I don't know whether that's a compliment or like genuinely that my makeup is terrifying. She also said this was when we were talking about sort of like family friendly horror movies. She put The Haunted Mansion is pretty scary for a
Haunted
kid's
Mansion
film.
is scary for a kid's
Like that
film.
movie.
Is that the one with General Zod?
Yes, yeah. Wait, yes, no, the original General Zod. Yeah, of course. I thought you meant Michael Shannon there for a second. In terms of if we're going for like kids horror movies, for me, like the one that always sticks out in my mind, apart from the one that goes back to my childhood, the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Walt Disney, the Magic Mirror fucked me up in that movie. But also Return to Oz, which I think was on Tate's shortlist of
It
movies.
was on my short list of movies.
I think a lot of people that grew up with that movie, we'd come right off the first movie. The fun musical, and don't get me wrong, like the flying monkeys were pretty creepy in that. Some people might think The Witch is scary, but then you go straight to Return to Oz. You're expecting those musical numbers. What you get is a headless Princess Mombi. You get the Wheelers. You get the Gnome King. It's terrifying. So yeah,
I've had to take off the mask. It's too hot. I'm sorry. The X-Wing is down. Scariest horror film I've ever seen in my life? It's Jaws. No one picked it. You are all wrong. This bracket is a sham. You all know I would have won with that pick too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably would have, because you're actually terrified by that film, and that trumps any of us arguing for why it's the best horror film of all time.
It trumps any of a horror film that can come before it, because none of us have scared me. And also, no one picked Scream, which I was quite shocked about.
No one picked Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, Sleepy Hollow is very good. I do like that one.
No one
I
picked
like that movie.
Halloween. There was so many. No one picked Saw. I was really surprised about that.
Yeah, I was saying,
Saw was on my short list of picks. The thing is with horror, there are hundreds, thousands of horror movies you can pick.
Yeah, but only a select few good ones.
Precisely
It's
that.
true. I am quite a snob when it comes to horror movies. It does take a lot to scare me.
Lesbian vampire killers.
There you go. There you go.
Fuck off is underrated.
Okay, we move on to the next
I
round.
guess we'll move to the next round.
Yes.
So this is
Oh,
going to
man.
be a good one. Yeah.
Thing versus Exorcist. Whose picks were they? Sorry, was that Chris
That is
versus
my pick. Actually, wait.
That
Before the next round, I'm going to quickly go to the toilet.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We'll stall for time.
Let's
This will
kill
be.
some more time. I actually have something to say, but I wish Tate was here for it. I watched the Q&A from last night, which I unfortunately missed, and I was able to catch that this morning on the way to work. I was very disappointed to see Tate say he has a better taste in film than me and list 12 films, 10 of which I own on Blu-ray. I just kind of laughed. I didn't say anything. I thought I'd wait my moment. I literally sat there laughing, and the only two that weren't there I don't have was Brooklyn and Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
Seven Samurai, I should own, but Brooklyn, that's not a taste in film. That's a taste in Saoirse Ronan.
I enjoyed the movie when I first saw it, but
would you put it in the same bracket as like Seven Samurai, Ex Machina, and all the films that were listed with that?
And we also know Tate's opinion on Ex Machina, that he hates the best scene in that movie, which is the disco dance scene number.
I was so shocked and appalled. I'm going to tell Tate now. Tate, I saw the Q&A when you listed the 12 films, which you said means you have a better taste in film than me. 10 of which I own.
Wait, what was that?
On the Q&A last night, I own 10. You listed loads of films. I own all of them but 2.
That would be Amelie, Loving Vincent, Grand Budapest Hotel.
I own Grand Budapest Hotel. Loving Vincent
you own
doesn't
a
count.
Wes Anderson film.
Yeah, I do.
Why does Loving Vincent not count? Do you own Seven Samurai?
No, I don't. I said to that I should.
Seven Samurai. What else did I say?
Brooklyn
Loving
shouldn't be
Vincent,
put in the same
Brooklyn.
category as those.
It totally should, and Chris will back me up on that.
He just said no, he didn't.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it the first time I saw it.
Man.
I've never gone back to it. Anyway,
That's more of a taste in Saoirse Ronan than in film.
oh, right. Let's keep this on track, guys. Let's keep it back to horror. So we have Tate with John Carpenter's The Thing against Tom with The Exorcist. We're going to keep it to 1 minute for this one. It's not until the final where we add the extra time on, so it's still going to be 1 minute for the main argument and 30 seconds for the rebuttal.
Yep.
So Tate, when you are ready.
Go.
So I want to talk about bridging scenes and the overall goal of the movie itself. So bridging scenes in The Thing, you have that overwhelming sense of terror that's always hanging over them. Who is possessed by the Thing? Who has been killed? Who has been taken? You have the different mysteries of who went out to the shed. You have the different mysteries of who's going to be next to be killed and how can we tell ourselves apart from the Thing itself. With The Exorcist, the bridging scenes is pretty boring. You have some good scenes like the spider crawl down the staircase. You have the twisting heads. But between that, can anyone actually remember the film itself? Can anyone remember any of the other horrors in the film itself? Not only that, but the end goal itself. With The Thing, you have this terror being unleashed onto the world. You have the sense of who's going to be next. If anyone discovers their bodies, will that pass on? With The Exorcist, all that's at stake is one person. And that doesn't really terrify me because what happens if the demon wins? One girl dies. That's it. Done. So there isn't really much at stake in your film. There's a lot to go at stake in my film.
Stop.
The horror is a lot harder as well.
Hey, Tom.
Right, you talk about stakes, but the stake is more personal in The Exorcist. So you have the stake of this the main character losing his faith, and then by the end he regains his Catholicism through the exorcisms. I mean, you talk about iconic imagery, disturbing scenes. Spider Crawl wasn't till the sequels, so there's that, and the head spinning, crucifixion, masturbation scene, and just the great lines like "Your mother sucks cocks in hell," lines like that make you really feel good about what you're watching, and it's just a horrific to see innocence get skewed by a possessive demon, and personally it frightened the living shit out of me.
Tate.
So in the film, do you remember Kurt Russell's character more of MacReady, or do you remember the priest, which I can't even name itself? Is it Max Sidow's priest? Do you remember Keith David's character more in itself? The performances alone should win this battle straight off the bat. This is an absolute stellar, defining performance. And to go along with that, we're talking about iconic scenes here. The blood test scene. The scene at the end where they're in the snow and waiting for the cold taken.
Hey, Tom.
Right. I mean, it's got a few bits that are okay in the thing. I mean, all I remember really from it is what's his name, who builds the spaceship.
Wilfred Brimley.
Wilfred Brimley. Brings the horror completely out of it by being stupid and absurd, and I think that is prevalent throughout the film. You have stupid and absurd.
Stop.
Oh, fuck.
Just based on that rebuttal at the end, I'm giving this one to Tate. I do think, Tate, you could have talked more about the awesome practical effects in the movie and
Chris, there's more rounds for that.
The technical side of it. I know that you've only got 1 minute to talk about it, but you could tell that this was incredibly hard for Tom because he loves, and I know he loves the Thing so much. Who doesn't love the Thing?
You can't argue for a film you really like.
It's very difficult. I've been in the situation, but it's very difficult. But
I had to try really hard for Blade Runner.
Yeah, I know. I still see that haunting you, Tom.
I think Tate, you could have gone into it a lot more than you did, but I think out of the two arguments, Tate, out of the two, you did have the stronger argument, so I'm giving it to The Thing.
Al or George?
I'll go while he drinks. I was going to give this to Tom. No, sorry, Chris.
Wait,
what?
Chris, sorry. No,
Tate.
What?
Sorry,
George.
I'm so lost. No, Tom lost. He got annihilated. I'm sorry. It was Tate. Whenever I think of John Carpenter, I think of Chris. Yeah. I'm sorry. That's why.
Yeah, sorry. I took Chris's pick basically.
It was literally he just had a strong Tate. Just you dominated the argument. Tom's rebuttal. I think Tom knew it too. So that purely goes to Tate.
Al, out of curiosity, who have you gone for?
I think I would have gone for Tate. I think overall his arguments were very strong. I felt his passion as well.
So straight.
Okay.
So the thing is through. That's absolutely fine. Next up we have
Sure,
The Shining.
take
Versus
The
Nightmare on
Shining.
Elm Street.
Is this Tate? Versus
No, it
who?
isn't. But this is a great battle, and I'm looking forward to this so much.
Tom, Nightmare on Elm Street is yours. Who's The Shining? Sorry, is that Chris?
Mine's
That
The
is
Shining.
Chris.
Mine's The Shining. Yeah.
Chris versus Tom. Tom, are you ready? No, sorry, Chris, you're first. No, sorry, Shining's first. Chris, you're first. Sorry, I'm in a minute.
Yeah.
Well, 3, 2, 1, go.
It's interesting that these films get paired together because both are very surrealist in their imagery. But I think if we're comparing that, The Shining instantly wins through Kubrick's masterful direction. A Nightmare on Elm Street is almost chief among them, just another slasher movie. You know, it was born from John Carpenter's Halloween, 1978, and then we had this slew of new slasher bad guys, Freddy Krueger being one of them. The concept of Freddy Krueger is very interesting. This guy who can kill you in your dreams, but The Shining is horror that's constantly all around you. It can possess you. It can change you as a person. The very essence, the evil, is within the hotel. With The Shining, you never get a sense that you can escape from it. It's constantly around you, and you are trapped. The weather, it's the exposure, it's the isolation. With A Nightmare on Elm Street, you know, in the daytime, you're fine. So you always have those constant cliche lapses where when it's daytime, it's happy, it's fun, you're safe. When it's nighttime, you're just going to get another killing. And it's just all these teenagers lined up for the meat grinder. You see it in many films. You see it in many films since and before.
In that case, just don't go to the hotel. So you think of it, and you know you say that in the day it's all happy and glamorous, but these kids literally haven't slept for days on end, and that will creep into their daytime routines. And if you fall asleep, you're dead. That is pure horror, and you know. So, okay, think of it this way. You say surrealist horror, the phone, the tongue in the phone. You wouldn't get that in a regular old slasher film, would you? You wouldn't get that with Michael Myers or Jason. You'd get that with a Wes Craven directed Nightmare on Elm Street. Absolutely perfect from beginning to end. That opening scene is fantastically well directed and sets up the atmosphere for the entirety of the film. And
Stop, Chris.
The Overlook Hotel is a lucrative business. It gets loads of people there for skiing and stuff, and they aren't aware of its horrific past. That was only made known to Jack Torrance, and obviously he was already changed at that point at the beginning of the film. Maybe he was even reincarnated from the ending. And let's talk about the endings to our movies, which leaves you with that bigger sense of dread, the fact that maybe Jack Torrance was always there. Your last one ends on one of the worst dummies used in film history, where the mother is pulled through the window. It completely takes you out of the moment. It's hilarious almost. And your film opens with the best kill, and then you're essentially watching the slasher movie where all the kills are really anticlimactic at that point.
Go.
Right, Shelley Duvall in that film is absolutely horrendous. You can see why that the take of it took multiple hundreds of takes for when you know Jack Torrance burst through with an axe. It's just crap actor, and Danny Lloyd as well. Really, you know, doesn't sell his character at all. The only strong saving grace of that is Jack Nicholson, and all you remember it for is Jack Nicholson's performance, really, and his interactions with everyone else.
God's sake, give me another minute. Give me another 10 seconds. That's all I need.
That was a very, very interesting fight. I haven't really decided yet. Al?
I think Chris made a very good point with it's just another slasher movie, and then that was well rebutted. That really was. But then Chris came back with you just sort of getting kills upon kills. They're a bit disappointing, but you kind of know what's going to happen. And I think I had to give it to Chris on that basis.
Tate?
I am going to pass this over to George.
Fucking hell. Oh, wait, it's in like... Oh, you mean it's in... You haven't decided?
I haven't decided yet.
Oh, I thought you were giving it to make it 1-1. I haven't decided either. You each battled off each other. Like, every time someone made a point, you either articulated and defended.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with what Tom said about Shelley Duvall. That I think it is horrible.
I've got such an argument against that, but it's so annoying when it ends, it rounds off. But yeah.
But then I thought Chris made the good point that the best kill was the first kill in terms of expectations of what was to follow. I don't know, Tate. Are you definitely sure you're not ready?
Actually, I am now ready.
Please go.
Very good arguments from both sides. Very good attack from both sides. Reasonably good defense as well. But the one point that stuck in my head was lining up girls for the meat grinder and it just being like the films that have come before it and the films after. I feel like that point stuck with me more than any of the other points that was said, so I'm going to give it to Chris.
So with that, The Shining is through. I still don't know who I'd have given it to. It's hard because I've seen The Shining, but I haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'm a massive Shining fan, but because I don't know enough about Elm Street. So I've been in that horrible situation for this, where I took all personal bias out. I think purely based on the argument, I think I would have given it to Chris. He just edged it for me. But that was a very strong fight because no one made the mistakes that would catch you out normally.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a very fair and a very strong fight. Probably two of the most iconic films left on this list as well.
Yeah. They were actually my number 1 and number 2 picks, actually. I think, Tate, they're your first and second pick for horror films, aren't they, as well? The Shining and The Thing.
The Shining and The Thing are my 2.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I meant Shining and Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, that too.
That's fine. So with that, Shining goes through, and The Thing will be fighting Shining next time. We have the Haunting versus Psycho. Al, are you ready?
Yeah.
Right, you have 1 minute on the clock, starting now.
Okay, so you think about Psycho, it's based in a hotel. You think about The Haunting, the house is almost a character within itself. The way the lighting is, the way the cameras are, it really feels oppressive. Like they really can't leave. There's something drawing them in. There's something there watching them, but there's not actually anything there. I mean, and then there's the voices, and then there's the images that Eleanor hears, and she doesn't know why she hears them because this is just some random house she's come to for the study. The premise of the film seems a bit flimsy to begin with, but I think that's part of the campy nature of it. It was the original storyline, and they've gone with it, but I think they've really done it in a new and fresh way for 1999. I really like the practical effects they use with the spikes coming from the ceiling when she's in the bed, and the whispering cherubs, and the twisting wooden doorknobs, the portraits and the voices, and the way you uncover the plot line is really...
And stop. Chris, go.
You talk about that, you keep doing this, you keep stripping the movie back to its basic form. Yes, it's just a hotel, it's a motel, whatever, but you said that the house isn't memorable, the hotel isn't memorable. The house upon the hill, like with the backlight and the silhouette of Norman Bates standing outside with Mother in the window, that like creepy wooden house on the hill, it's harkening back to Universal Monsters. It's also been, done in other films since then, with like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A lot of other horror films have based that image off this one, and it is still an incredibly creepy image. Absolute powerhouse performance from Anthony Perkins in this one. I can't harp on him enough. He is fantastic. He plays the very quiet, timid side to him, but with that underlying, menace and that that killer that is within him as well. And I love how the film is framed at the start, because we enter this, for the first shot of the movie is this slow zoom in on a building, and the camera could go into any one of those windows, but it just happens that we go into like Janet Leigh's window, and for the first quarter of the movie we just follow her story. She's taking money away from a bank, and then she stumbles into this horror film, which makes it much more tension filled.
Stop. I'll go.
Well, the thing is, okay, it builds up with tension. Yeah. It's a good movie. But The Haunting builds up with tension too. It's a classic haunted house movie. There's nothing I love more than a classic haunted house movie. You know roughly what you're going to get, but it's great fun working out the storyline. I mean, you've got, and this is a classic. This is a remake of the classic film from the 60s. So, it's not like, it's not like it's camp to do it now.
Chris, go.
It's a remake with more CGI, directed by the guy who did Twister, Speed 2 Cruise Control, and Tomb Raider: The Cradle of Life. Need I say more? Psycho proved that remaking a classic doesn't, it doesn't work. Psycho is the epitome of horror. It stood the test of time. Most films from that time, 1964, don't. Psycho absolutely does, through its performances, through its score, through its cinematography and perfect direction from Alfred Hitchcock. Your movie is, it was nominated for Razzies.
Oh, nice.
Low blow.
Low blow.
Chris, you dominate that round. I'm sorry. There was no competition there. Psycho just had the stronger argument, attack, defense, all of it.
Thank you.
Chris goes through very, very easily.
Oh, I feel really sad now. I wish Van Helsing was still in the competition. Tom?
Yeah. Well, I think my issue stems from Al that you seem to kind of lose your way when articulating your argument. So I'm sure you had the required words on the tip of your tongue, but it just didn't feel like you articulated them in a way
not
that
really. Gonna find my way.
Yeah,
Sort of put my mouth and try and find myself along the way. To be honest.
Yeah. I'm sure you could have taken down Psycho. Had
I haven't seen it, mate.
No,
yeah, I've got a clue, mate.
It's just about a guy in drag, like.
It is. Yeah. A guy in drag and a fake-looking skeleton.
And one of the worst falling downstairs shots I've ever seen in any movie, which they replicated in both of the sequels, I think, for some reason. Anyway, we move on to the last fight of the next of this.
We have
round.
Tate. We have the last of the quarterfinals. We have Tate and Get Out versus Chris and The Fly.
Mm-hmm.
Tate, you're up first.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a second.
Very interesting. So 1 minute.
Wait a second. Just need a drink.
Yeah, and drink. He's doing a tactical resupply of beverage.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant. So, in regards to that, wait, why does it say that word? That's irrelevant. Right, 1 minute on the clock, Tate, going now.
Your film has no tension. Your film basically works off one single moment, which is a moment of gore where he actually kind of goes into the telepod and melts into the fly or whatever the fuck happens with that machine. Your film only works on that one level of horror and only works to that one advantage. With Get Out, you've got strong performances of a paranoid, isolated commentary on Monday racism and an experience that people will always get, the sense of awkwardness that comes into this film and the sense of unknown and the thrill that comes with the family almost being possessed in their goal to try and take the DNA from the human and put it into themselves. It delivers on that low level of tension all the way through the entire film, that sense of uneasiness, and then hits you with that sense of gore a little bit towards the end to help ramp it up.
Chris, go.
You completely lost your argument from the opening line when you said The Fly doesn't have any tension. The tension comes from seeing the degradation of this character, a character you love, a character you respect at the beginning of the film, and a relationship you actually buy into. Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis have great chemistry in this movie, and it's the horror from her perspective almost, as you see him change, as he goes from this really athletic, confident guy into this really grotesque, horrible monster. You pity him, but then you come around to, as she does in the movie, you are very much watching the movie through her eyes as she goes on. Not to mention great practical effects, which actually won the Academy Award. Very grotesque, vile practical effects in this movie. Your film gets so ridiculous. Like you talked about basing it in real life horror and things like that. And whilst The Fly is completely out there, it gets too complicated. The whole hypnotic things. If it was just about a guy that gets swept up into this family, but there's this underlying dread there, and they've got another agenda, that would have been great. He couldn't get out. The fact that they bring in this
stop.
You cannot say that the sink into the floor scene is not an incredible scene of horror that completely blows the film wide open. The film delivers on every single level of horror that you'd want from a modern day horror. Okay, The Fly has one good scene of practical effects. The degradation of the character in itself doesn't bring any tension. It just makes you want to go, can we please get to the moment where we see him fully as the Fly? whilst this film gets you all the way through this entire roller coaster of emotions that it takes you on, the sense of fear and dread in modern-day society.
Hey, Crisco.
The Fly is a formality, you know where it's going to end, but like the real meat of that story comes from seeing him change, seeing the different stages of his metamorphosis. With your movie, in all honesty, the hypnotherapy scene and all that stuff took me completely out of the movie. What other scenes of horror does your movie have? A guy running towards the camera and then running to the side? That's not scary. It gets completely ridiculous. Even the fact that it was directed by a guy who's, you know, like prolific in the comedy world, it does have that comedic edge to it. And to me, that takes me right out of the movie. The ending gets very hokey. You've got the comic relief character at the end that saves him. The Fly manages to keep its tone.
I wish I had more time to argue. God damn it!
That was a very interesting fight.
I would never have thought those two movies would have got paired
No,
together.
same.
In all honesty, like, it's very weird.
Completely different ends of the horror spectrum.
Anyone come with any opinion yet?
Yeah, I'll say mine first. Based on Chris's rebuttal from that, I think he edges it slightly. I think both of you articulated your points rather eloquently, and both of you made really strong cases for both films. But I think my vote ultimately has to go with Chris. I think he just had that slight tiny edge in terms of arguments.
Thanks. Al, George, either one.
Al?
Al is stroking his beard, so it looks like he's
I'm still thinking.
Okay. All right. I haven't got an opinion yet, so I'm just going to read out, as I always do, my thoughts out loud. So I thought Tate attacked Fly very strong.
Mhm.
Chris's defenses were on par. He blocked any attack Al had on him. Chris made some very good points in regards to the hypnotherapy and the issues with Get Out. More could have been attacked on that. However, that's my personal opinion of Get Out that more could have been attacked on. I feel as if you each argued and defended well enough for yours. However, I feel that Chris's defending was better than Tate's defending. But then in my head, I'm also thinking, did Chris as what Tate did? I don't know. So, Al, have you made your mind up yet?
Yes.
Go first.
I think I was following a similar train of thought, and I think that overall Chris's defending was better. Not by much, though.
I wish I could defend. I wish I could defend that rebuttal. Oh man, I wish I could defend that rebuttal. But that's
so.
fair.
Al, are you sending the fly through?
Yes.
Okay, I'd have done the same thing.
nice.
Well, to be fair, Get Out did well. And I'm surprised no one attacked the last 40 minutes.
In all honesty, I am glad that we did get Out in there. I know we've got Insidious on there, but it's nice to get some modern horror movies in there as well. Like everyone talks about the greats. Like
it is genuinely a great film.
I really want to Get Out versus The Shining.
It is a good film.
And I think the first hour is some of the best sort of horror and suspense I've ever seen in my life, and the last 40 minutes is an absolute monstrosity of shite, and it completely undoes everything incredible that first hour did. So I've got a lot of issues with that last 40 minutes of the Get Out. But anyway, this is my argument because it's out. The Fly goes through. So we have two semi-finals now. We have The Thing versus The Shining.
God almighty, this is like a final fight right here.
Well, Chris, I had to do The Thing versus Exorcist last round.
Yeah.
So this has been like tough for me, and you had to face off against Nightmare on Elm Street. I'd have to say it's a very difficult side of the bracket.
The reason that this one's so tough in particular, though, The Thing versus The Shining, is that they are very, very similar films, almost in terms of location, themes, and everything like that. So it'll be a good one.
Wait, Chris, is that a new Star Wars poster?
I've had that for a while. It's a canvas that I got. Yeah, it's just off the market. Yeah.
Get it signed.
Hold on, George's SeaWorld man confirmed.
Well, where I am now, I've got nothing of any interest for anyone to see. Everything good is at home.
Maybe he'll want to know how many inches your door is to your room, perhaps. Maybe.
Well, you know, the internet doesn't really work, so when we
I'm
get
imagining some kind of like map of the UK with like various coloured string
Pinpoints.
bits across. Yeah, yeah.
I will find them. Right, in regards to that, then let's move on. Thing is up first, which is Tate. You have 1 minute, Heisenberg, on the clock. So, beginning in 3, 2, 1, go.
As Chris said, both these films are quite similar. They both work on themes of isolation. They both work on themes of paranoia. What we've really got to take from this in itself is, what is the better horror film? I mean, honestly here, which one is the most terrifying? You've got a film where it's the complete unknown of who the monster is. And when the monster does appear, it still holds up today. The use of practical effects in that film is phenomenal. Really, really, really well done. When we look at The Shining, I still think that there are parts of that film which are incredibly boring. Not only that, but it was raised up in an earlier statement. I feel like they could remove themselves from that isolation. And there is a sense that they can actually get out of the situation. And we know exactly where the horror is coming from. The sense of unknown completely overwhelms you in The Thing, more so than The Shining will ever do in any sense of horror.
Chris.
Tate, I'm going to use a previous argument that you used in this very bracket against Tom, in that which movie can you base yourself in the real world in the most? A sci-fi creature that's crash landed in the Arctic and terrorizing people and copying them, or a dad who snaps and tries to kill his family in a secluded location? That very argument right there is testament to why I think The Shining is a stronger movie. Not to mention that, but John Carpenter's The Thing, in a similar way to the movie Predator, it is kind of like an 80s action movie almost. You've got these very quippy characters. You've got the action hero of Kurt Russell, for example. Lines like, Mac wants the flamethrower. Mac wants the what? Like, yeah, fuck you too. And whilst, like, obviously you get a very iconic line in The Shining of "Here's Johnny," it's all done in the moment. It's not done for comedic effect. It's not done for anything like that. You do see this slow change of this character and this building dread that the hotel has. Obviously, when people are leaving at the beginning and it's just the family on their own, you immediately get that tension and how labyrinth.
I'm sorry, Chris, but was your argument what's more believable, aliens in Antarctica or ghosts at a ski resort? If that's purely what your argument is based off and exactly what you said at the start there, then you've got to really understand the situation. I don't think ghosts in a hotel would be believable in a sense, and you can't really base your argument off that. My film works on multiple levels of horror that yours doesn't. It works way better on the gore factor. It works way better on the tension building factor. It works way better on the paranoia that comes with it. The sense of unease of the unknown.
Go.
The horror from yours comes from the great practical effects work. And I'm not going to deny that the practical effects work is great, but it's from a sense of revulsion. It's disgust. It is the gore, which, you know, a dime a dozen in horror movies. This one focuses on the characters. You talk about boring, slow moments. It has to be a slow burn to see that slow change of the character. If you immediately do it from the beginning, you've lost your film entirely there. The Shining is an absolute masterclass of direction, pacing, music, acting as well. You talked about the acting earlier. Kubrick was doing that to get her to that point. To get, Damn it, not enough time.
Difficult.
Close. That was a very good fight. Has anyone got an opinion yet?
That was
tough.
I'll go first. I like the fact that Chris brought up what Tate said earlier. However, then Tate did sort of reverse that onto itself with the whole ghosts. So I think that rules that attack out. I think it was even. Everyone defended. Everyone sacked. It was balanced. No one said anything that stuck with me the most. So I'm quite neutral in this. So I'm trying to rewind to try in my head and get the entire racket in my head. Chris praised the practical effects in the film, which is absolutely fine because he admitted that it wasn't as in like a defeat that defeated his own argument. Because then he balanced it back with his defense on his character. Not character, so like the one his rebuttal when he spoke about the character piece. Oh, Tom, please say you've had a decision. Ow. Oh. This is balanced. This is like perfectly balanced as all things. This to be fair, this could have been the final. On paper, this probably is the final.
I mean, when we did our top 10 horror films of all time, we had the top 3 for all of us was Alien, The Shining, and The Thing. They appeared in both mine and Chris's top 3s in differing orders.
Jeez.
Is it Tom Cant's like, Al? Shine some light.
Come on, Al.
I like Chris's argument about the acting and about it being there's a lot of tension and it is more believable because it's in a hotel rather than in the Arctic, where I'm probably not going to be. But I've been in hotels before. Never been to the Arctic. Might surprise you. Never been. So I can see, so
have you made your mind
I
up?
don't know. It's very close, but I think
have you made your mind up? Because I think I've got mine in my head now.
I think I have to give it to Chris by a hair.
Oh, okay.
Tom, have you got yours?
I'm still undecided.
God, this is tension building right here. We talk about The Shining or The Thing. God.
because you know who got their points across the well enough to justify. Yeah, please.
Right, there's one thing that stood out to me when somebody mentioned an alien killing person to person or whatever it is. And then Chris said, this is the father going after his son and wife. No, what? Yeah, son and wife, that's the one. And I think that stuck with me the most in regard to the horror. So I think I'm putting Chris through purely because that's what's sticking the most into my head. I don't know how anyone can call that fight. That's probably one of the best fights.
I don't remember Chris saying anything along the lines of, like, it's an alien versus...
No, he mentioned
I said like an alien crash landing in the Arctic and copying people against a dad going after killing his wife and child in a secluded location. I think something.
And that's what stuck in my head.
That's fair enough.
I think this fight deserved longer. That's what I'm going to say. But I'm giving my vote to The Shining.
I think it comes down to which I found more scary, like the ideas more scary. How you offer those arguments to how? So it's trying to say it in a way that I can't really say the correct phrase, but which one I found the scariest based on your arguments is essentially what I'm trying to say. And I think it probably have to go to Tate.
Okay.
For that, I think he made a stronger case for why his film was indeed a brilliant horror film. I mean, both of them are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think Chris went through anyway with 2 picks.
Yeah, I was going to say if you'd have got that in first, Tom, that would have been a very.
That would have, yeah.
It was tough because both of you did quite well on that.
Yeah, and they're as I said, like my top 2 horror movies. They're every day of the week. They're almost interchangeable from each other. Really,
no one had any weaknesses in regards to like the argument itself. It came to what lasted longer, which made the most point in terms of what you see as the argument.
And they're always my favorite battles as well. Like me and you, George, we have a lot of them where it's the respectful fight where you both like
neither of you attacked the other because deep down that you didn't believe in what you're attacking.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you get the respect in the argument, that's what opens up to, okay, this is a good argument. And I think that's what you two had between yourselves.
So where does this leave the bracket now then?
This leaves you with The Fly versus Psycho, which is
both yours, Chris.
2 Chris picks. So Chris has won this incarnation of Battle of the Brackets.
But we shall continue the game. Chris, would you like to dedicate a film to somebody for the semi-final?
Yes. So so the semi-final is going to be. So what's versus what? It's The Shining versus.
It's Psycho versus Fly.
Oh, Psycho versus Fly. I am going to give The Fly to Tom because I know this is one of his favorite movies. He likes his body horror films and he loves his Cronenberg movies. So,
fuck yeah.
Do your worst.
Right. 1 minute on the clock for Psycho going first. Chris,
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go.
As I mentioned countless times, this is easily Alfred Hitchcock's best movie and one of the best horror movies ever made. Performances, staging, everything like that. The hotel itself is very much a character. And the real horror comes from following this completely innocuous situation with Janet Leigh's character. And then when you enter the motel, you are almost with her character. You're seeing this guy, you know there's not quite something right with him. You've seen the title. And what Hitchcock did brilliantly with this movie is he wouldn't allow people into the movie theater if they were late to save on spoilers. So people had no idea what was going to happen midway through this movie. The shower scene, you know, if we go in moments, is easily one of the most iconic in horror movie history. The soundtrack, the shadow behind the shower curtain, everything builds at such a good place. And when it hits, it still has the impact nowadays. Every time you watch the movie, you almost watch it with a smile on your face because you know what's coming, but it still has that impact. David Cronenberg's The Fly is a great body horror movie. It absolutely is.
Stop.
Damn it.
Tom.
It is a great body horror movie, and David Cronenberg utilizes his makeup artists surprisingly well. So this is the Academy Award winning sort of makeup for that year, designed by Chris Wallace, and it's absolutely superb. You see the degradation in each of the incarnations of Jeff Goldblum's man into Fly, and you see his performance reflects his change of nature. And it really is the horror comes from that change, and of course Cronenberg's great directing and great showcase of visceral body, you know, gruesome, just ugh. It's I'm not sure what else I can say apart from the body horror is great.
Chris,
and if you want body horror,
Chris.
We also have to look at the dates that these were released. So I'm going back to 1960 with this one. Obviously, they couldn't push the envelope too far, otherwise they would have got banned. But they still were very shocking in what they did show in the movie. Although you only see the knife light stab a few times, your movie obviously came out in the 80s, decades later, where people were more lax like that. So you do see more of the gore and things like that. But would your movie still be as good with all those makeup and practical effects? Like, I think that horror showcases better in Psycho because it strips it back to its most, primeval form, and it gets it across. Damn it,
Tom.
Okay, it's an alternate take on the inner conflict between. So you think of werewolf movies, the conflict of beast versus man. It is in fact a different take on that. On that story that has been told time and time again. The transformation sequences are fantastic, fantastically well done, and I just my
Stop.
argument. Fuck.
I flubbed mine. I completely flubbed mine.
Yeah,
I could have said so much more.
Chris said he flubbed his, but he finally brought up the shower scene. In detail, the soundtrack, the curtain. Chris wins it purely on that description. I think the attack was stronger.
I was going to give it based purely on this one sentence that was said, stripping back the horror to its bare roots, or along those words of what Chris said, and that really is what Psycho is. It is the word psycho. It perfectly embodies that. I think he argues you there, Tom, even though it was a good effort with a film that wasn't yours originally to be picked.
Okay.
Al?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to give it to Chris, but not by much. I do think his defense was very, very strong.
Awesome. Right. So
It's quite difficult because I've seen the film, so
yeah, absolutely. So that leaves the final.
You make me visualize it. I'm there
Yes.
with you when you're talking about it.
I do just want to point out, as said in our 1,500 subscriber special, which people should go and watch. Chris is kind of the horror resident of this channel.
He would be very disappointed if he lost out to someone that's on
He
horror
would be,
films.
Yeah, right.
he would be very disappointed if he lost out to someone, especially me, seeing as I'm not the biggest horror fan.
Mhm.
I feel like that would have really been sticking it to him. But in the end, it has ended up with a Chris versus Chris final in a Chris versus Chris semi-final. And we're left with The Shining versus Psycho. Now,
And
Chris,
what a fun, like,
are you going to have an inner monologue and argue with yourself?
I could do like the Jack Torrance 1,000-yard stare and get completely methoded about it.
No, Chris, do one side of the face and then turn and do the other side.
I will say though, like I think George mentioned this, the Thing versus The Shining, that is a final round. But I think that The Shining versus Psycho is still very interesting.
I mean, Chris, if you want to do another 30 seconds of The Thing versus The Shining, I'd happily do that.
Oh, don't count on it. Don't count on it. I don't think I'll win. If it went to another 30 seconds, I don't think I'd win that, to be honest.
I know.
So yeah, The Shining versus Psycho. I didn't expect to see this pairing in the final.
Chris, it was your number 1 and number 3 pick.
Yeah.
Like you had to kind of expect at least.
I thought The Shining had a chance of getting through to the final, but I thought Psycho would definitely drop to the wayside somewhere along the lines.
It is a classic.
But yeah, so I need to defer the argument to someone else again, don't I? So Tate, you know, you may have flubbed it with The Birds, but I'm going to give you one more shot with Alfred Hitchcock here, okay? So I'm going to give you Psycho.
Okay.
Okay.
So a minute and a half on the clock. So 1 minute and a half each, followed by a 45-second rebuttal, I believe.
Yep, that's right.
So you're going to get 2 minutes 15 each. Chris, you're first. Al, your minute and a half begins now.
Oh, sorry. Wait, no, I'm up first, aren't I?
Yeah,
Yes, that's what we said.
Oh, I thought you said Al. Sorry, Al. Your time starts now. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, no, I meant Chris. Sorry.
That's right.
3.
Just say, it's not my film.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, I'm going to try and get a bit of head of the curb here for a second because I'm guessing this is going to come up when it's going to be Janet Leigh versus Shelley Duvall. Stanley, you talked about earlier the scene where, you know, he kept asking her to do take after take after take. I think it's rumored that they went over 100 takes, like to the point where she was absolutely hysterical, catatonic, desperate. In my opinion, Kubrick was doing that to get her to that point. When you are yourself in an absolutely hysteric state, repetition, everything like that, and it amounts to you, and there's no breaks in between shooting. It's just like again, these very high emotive, tension-filled scenes. I think he did that, and I completely believe her in that scene when she's cowering in that corner, clutching that knife for dear life, and it's just the shot of the axe coming through the door. I believe every single second of when she's screaming, and all the way throughout the movie. A lot of people might think that, you know, she's kind of like a shrill. Oh, we apparently have ghosts in the background, that she's like a shrill protagonist and she gets annoying. But in my opinion, like if you were in that situation, if you were completely defenseless, like of course you'd act in that way. And she does have to step up as a character, as a female lead. You know, she's having to protect her son. She's also having to try and get out herself. So I definitely think that her performance is very underrated in that movie. Let's talk about the pacing as well, because both of these movies are very slow burn. I think there's one scene in particular in your movie that definitely does deflate the ending of the movie for me. And maybe this was a product of its time, but there's a scene where there's a psychiatrist, basically, it's the exposition scene at the end of the movie. He basically...
Stop.
Okay.
Go.
Chris, let's not be coy here. Her performance was terrible on the first take. Her performance was terrible on the 100th take. Just accept that it was a bad performance in a film and let's move on. It's funny that you're going to bring up the ending scene of Psycho, because I've never been more terrified by a smile in a horror-based film than the smile that he gives at the end. And the line of him not being able to hurt a fly shows that his behavior hasn't changed throughout the entire film. It was always underlying throughout his entire character, and he pulled the wool over everyone's eyes until he was discovered towards the end. The sense of tension that is brought forward by Psycho is completely unreal. The subverting of expectations that it brought towards cinema, the plot twist in itself of the main character being killed off midway through, absolutely iconic. That scene alone probably changed horror music forever. Because as soon as you hear the dun 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 dun, everyone immediately knows it's Psycho. I wouldn't be able to name a single kind of tune or sound that came from The Shining other than Here's Johnny. Psycho is a better horror film on base grounds, and it is the best horror film of all time. It works on that inherent kind of paranoia that was roaming around at the time of serial killers, and completely subverts the expectation of the genre before it.
Hey, Chris?
I do not disagree with you for a second on that final shot of the movie. The final shot of Psycho is fantastic. What I'm referring to is the exposition scene before it, where the psychiatrist basically painstakingly highlights everything that transpired in the movie. It was done as a blow to like cushion the audiences of what they just witnessed, and that definitely does deflate the ending of the movie for me. You also talked about that, you know, like he hasn't changed. Norman Bates hasn't changed by the end of the movie. Well, then, you know, the movie's called Psycho. You're essentially not getting anything. There's no change to the character. There's no arc there. He remains the same. Whereas Jack Torrance in the movie, Jack Nicholson, we're introduced to him. You know, he's a family man. He's going for a new job. He's wanting to work on a project. And then with the hotel and maybe a past life or something like that, a reincarnation, the ending scene is open to interpretation. Oh, wow. That went really quick.
Take, go.
I thought we were doing a minute rebuttal, or is it 30 seconds?
It's 45.
Oh, 45. Oh, sorry about that.
No, we had 30 seconds onto each, so it's a minute and a half and a minute.
Oh, shit. Chris, you've got another 15 seconds then. Go now.
Thank you.
Oh, God, I've lost my train of thought.
We'll let you have another 20 seconds then, because it's unfair because we took you out of the train of thought there.
Okay, that's all right.
Go.
Okay, so yeah, so with Jack Torrance as a family man, you see that change to him. The hotel changes him, and the surroundings and the ghostly imagery. So you do see more of a change to him. And as the slow burn and the pacing of the movie suggests, we get to see that greater character study almost of Jack Torrance and his family as they try to survive. Whereas Psycho is literally just that. It's a Psycho.
Stop. Take 1 minute now.
You pointed out that there was a softening kind of blow towards the end of the film. The film was so scary to audiences of its time, so shocking that he had to put that in to make it a little bit easier so people didn't go away completely terrified having nightmares. Your film doesn't envelop any form of nightmares, even in the time that the film came out itself. It's one of those spooky house stories which has a bit of tension. But once again, it's a slow burn. It's boring in certain places. Some of the acting in it is not very good. And with Psycho, what you've got is an incredibly well-acted, career-defining performance from its characters. You've got the inherent use of horror that's there, and it changed the horror genre forever. I can't say that about The Shining. There were films with good tension before, there are films with good tension after that work with haunted houses. Psycho completely changed the horror genre, and it's still regarded as the best, the quintessential horror film that you should watch. I'm done.
Mic drop. Has anybody got their mind made up?
Yes.
Go, Tom, go.
Psycho.
Why? Why, Tom? Why?
Why? Because I think Tate attacked The Shining quite well, and I think you had missed opportunities there to mention some of the more nightmare-defining scenes in Shining.
I want to point this out, Chris. You didn't mention any of the gore moments in The Shining, like the blood elevator. You didn't mention the twins.
For that.
Why didn't you mention those?
Why does gore have to be the be-all and end-all of horror?
No, but Chris, there are different elements of horror that you have in horror films. And the fact that it envelops a load of different genres of horror and brings them together would have made your argument pretty much unbeatable. I couldn't have rebutted that.
Okay.
I agree.
How have you made your mind up?
Oh, I think I'm going to give it to Tate. I think his attack was very strong, and very strong arguments. I enjoyed his passion also. He just convinced me overall, to be honest.
Okay.
I picked the wrong Hitchcock film.
I would have given this to Tate, or based upon this argument. Obviously, Chris wins overall. It was a stronger argument. I don't think Chris argued enough for The Shining. I think there was some really... Chris, you didn't really speak about the axe much.
No.
Like, not that, but I mean, you would have won this argument if you'd have said that, you know, the shower scene is the most iconic horror scene until the axe scene. Because the axe scene replaced that. You could have won that with that one sentence. I don't think you brought enough. I mean, you've won anyway, so it's pointless, but you didn't bring enough firepower to the arsenal for this.
Yeah.
So Tate wins this argument.
I want to say, as that is my third mini victory where I've taken over someone else's pick.
You still haven't won.
I feel like I'm owed a battle of the brackets now. That's 3 times I've picked up someone else's pick and
This
won
is
it.
practice, hey. This is
But
practice.
it's like, you know, it's like picking up. I don't know.
I want to point out as well.
You
I
picked the
don't
wrong
think
film. That's the problem.
I know. I picked the wrong Hitchcock film.
You do the wrong research.
I pick films which I personally believe are the best horror films.
Like you believe in Alfie Allen.
I believe in Alfie Allen. Who doesn't?
And your belief has got you nowhere.
I
No,
will say,
tonight was a good
I'm happy
fight.
to see Psycho win. Like obviously, Shining was my number 1 pick. It is my favorite horror film. But if someone said that Psycho is the best horror movie, I ain't going to argue with them. You know what I mean? Like what Hitchcock did with that movie and the history of it and the legacy that it's had and continues to have. It is a worthy winner. It's just always weird when you have like all your picks in the fight. It's it's a strange situation.
It's really weird when you have like 3 in the semis because you know you've got 1 guarantee in the final,
Yeah,
and then you kind of hold up.
and it is tough fighting back to back to back as well. So like you know when you round after round, like constantly switching between movies, it does get tough. So like as we said, like to me, the real final of this was The Shining versus The Thing, because if you're going to compare 2 horror movies, that is a hell of a double feature. Like back to back, those movies are pretty much identical in its themes and setting, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, no, this was a good one.
I want to also point out that it is no longer Halloween here in the UK.
No, it's not. So I don't have any makeup wipes with me. I feel very now sitting here on 1st of November like this. But
I think
easy
that was a good
fix,
fight.
easy fix.
Considering I'm not into horror films, I thought that was
Yeah.
a good fight. That was a nice balance. It was very weird judging it.
I think it was good to get
just-
horror out there as well because we've done, this is our 20th episode of Battle of the Brackets now, and we haven't even talked about horror really. I mean, obviously we've done like some horror film reviews on the channel, few and far between, but to actually like have a bracket dedicated to it, that's kind of appeased me now. And I don't know what the next one's going to be. I know that November we've got the new Creed movie. Oh yeah, we do have Spider-Man. Maybe we could do a Spider-Man pick.
We do have we also have a Harry Potter movie coming out pretty soon.
Yeah.
And we've never done one before. And this may be one for December, but we kind of need to do a Christmas films Battle of the Brackets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pointless because it's the only answer is Die Hard.
I would disagree with you completely there.
And
I'd
that's
say-
like,
Yes,
Tate
We'll
will
have to-
say It's a Wonderful Life. I will say it's Jingle All the Way.
I've got Jingle Way second.
Or Home Alone. There's a lot of picks on there.
there is a lot of picks on there.
Jack Frost, 1997 horror film.
Yes. Yeah. With Michael Keaton, he was my lucky charm last time. Maybe we could get him to the final again if we had picked that.
Has a
Die Hard. There's Die Hard 2.
Die Hard 2 is not set at Christmas.
Yeah, it is.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's not. I swear it isn't.
It is. It's all the other ones that aren't.
But the point is,
no,
we
that-
have a whole list of possible brackets that we've got going.
Oh
on.
yeah,
Other
Christmas
ideas,
Eve. You're right.
I mean, if anyone's an insight, the last like month, the only thing in our group messages has just been Spider-Man memes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tate's
it's-
just quietly there, like defending Tom Holland when he knows that he's about to get
I
a
still
barrage of
think
about 10.
I've already told you guys. Sam Raimi, all 3 films are better than Homecoming. I just don't think that Homecoming is a bad film.
I have a controversial opinion.
You're going to say you like Andrew Garfield.
No, I thought Homecoming was really, really good.
No, it's not a controversial opinion.
It is.
It's not.
the wrong opinion.
It isn't.
That's slander.
Libel's written. I think to put this to bed, finally, we are going to have to do a Spider-Man bracket of some kind when Into the Spider-Verse comes out. And, we have kind of got our own Spider-Verse going on at the moment. We've had the Raimi trilogy, we've had the Andrew Garfield movies, and we've got the new one. So there's plenty to argue, although the best pits, maybe I'm a bit biased, will come from the original trilogy. Will any, if any, come from the other films? We'll have to wait and
I've got one.
We might have the Michael Keaton scene that we had in the Marvel Cinematic Universe picks before.
Oh, I was just going to say when Tom Holland died and
What's
just
that?
erupted into a standing ovation and there was
Well,
applause.
thanks for that. Spoiler alert.
No worries, Al. They've already announced the next Spider-Man film coming after his so-called death.
Okay.
Actually, that's one thing. Hey, Marvel, this guy died, but we just filmed his next film. But no, that will be. We will do something. There will be a new bracket, and as always, we will give you very late notice in regards to getting the new bracket done, like this one. And fingers crossed, I have better Wi-Fi. Anyone in the comments? Normally, I'm following them, reading them. I literally cannot check the comments because the internet's so poor, and I focused everything onto getting onto the stream, which I'm happy I've been able to do tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to get you back on. And I'm sure for the sake of OCD and completionist, we will have an image with the bracket up in case people want to see it, or like a visual aid. There's
no way there won't be one.
Yeah.
I will make that dead set next time I'm home, which is going to be next weekend. So, yes.
So in terms of stuff going on with the channel, we'll still be bringing you more movie reviews. I think, thankfully, November's easing up a little bit, although we will still have some absolutely big movies coming out. As we mentioned, we've got Crimes of Grindelwald coming out in a couple of weeks' time. We've got the new Creed movie. And this month, I mean, I don't know when you're available, George, but it'd be great if we could do some of the Rocky movie reviews, if we could get those out at some point. If we do 2 a week or something like that, or do like a combined Rocky discussion, whatever we could do for that, that'd be pretty cool to do. There'll be trailer reactions from me, and as we discussed on the 1,500 subscribers video yesterday, we have got a lot of show ideas in the pipeline. It's just going to be a case of getting on those as and when we can. Want to say a big thank you to everyone that's been on the panel tonight. So obviously George Tate, Tom, returning after a very long time. Great to have you on arguing horror movies, because we know that you love horror movies. And Al, by popular demand, as I said, there was a lot of people messaging me, wanted you back on. We give the people what they want. It's great to have you on, and hopefully get you on another one very, very shortly.
Cheers, man. Good to hear.
No worries, mate. And thank you to everyone in the comments as well who was messaging throughout. Sheila, as always, we had AWRT Games. Brinsley, as always, great to have you on, and thanks for the support. That'll do it for our video for right now. We can't say happy Halloween, but thank you to everyone who joined. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.